First off, the name of the title of the sermon is wrong because when I was proofreading the slides, this is last week's title. So that's my bad. But the title of the sermon is, What's in a Name? What's in a Name? And here we have Moses in the burning bush. If we think about it, Moses is doing pretty good right now, right? I mean, he killed the Egyptian soldier. He ran because he was afraid that he was going to get caught and sent to Pharaoh. And so now he's over, and he's got a wife, he has a son, he's a shepherd, he doesn't have to face his past. Everything is pretty good. And then, almost like a fishing lure to me, it seems like this bush, God says, I'll see if I can get Moses to turn aside. And he doesn't, God always woos, doesn't force himself upon us. And so it's almost like Moses is out there with the sheep and he's got this fly rod and he tosses this bush and he makes this bush come on fire. And Moses is like, I think I'll go sniff that out. What's going on there? And of course, once he goes over there, God's got him, right? Falls on his knees. This is holy ground. God is going to complicate one more human being's life now in the form of Moses. You have one more. What's in a name? If you think about it, if you name something, you have power over it. If you know someone's name, that's the beginning of a relationship. When you've got a horrible stomach ache or a pain in your side. You go to the doctor. We're confused. The doctor says, you have an appendicitis. It gives you power over that, doesn't it? I mean, once you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, here's what's wrong with you. You know the attribute of the disease because you know now the name of the disease. It gives us some power and it gives us some control over those things. So back in those days in the ancient Near East, the gods, the God we worship, as well as pagan gods, Greco-Roman gods, they were pretty wary of telling people what their name was. And if you look at the way this story goes, God is kind of, let me step into this gingerly. You don't want to tell someone your name unless you're ready to sort of enter into some kind of a relationship. Let me have one more. So why does God have Adam name the animals? Told you we needed to get here sooner. Because it gives Adam some power and some control over his surroundings and whatnot. This is kind of a gift from God in Genesis that Adam gets to name the animals. Let me have one more, Kate.
How many times have we told you? That rasa is crawling with mandachis.
Yes, dear Berto.
Go away, go. It's just Dante. Never name a street dog. I'll follow you forever. Now, go get my shoe.
So, every week my wife and I sit down, as soon as I've done my research, we FaceTime and I'll say, well, here's what I'm thinking, and then we start throwing out ideas. And Marta and I like to watch Disney cartoon movies together. Never name a street dog. She's like, the movie Coco, this is perfect. Remember when she throws her shoe at the dog, it says, never name a street dog. And why do you not name a street dog? Because it starts a relationship, right? If you don't want to have a relationship with someone, you don't tell them your name. Or you don't name them. So, what are our lessons today? We could take this sermon in a whole bunch of different ways, couldn't we? Last week we talked about altars in the world. Altars in nowhere places. Here we have a bush in the middle of the desert that all of a sudden God says what? Take off your sandals, this is holy ground. We could take it in that direction. We could take it in a direction of what happens when God puts a call in our lives. A lot of times all hell breaks loose, doesn't it? What happens when we don't face our past? And we decide to compartmentalize and stay a shepherd where it's safe. Today I want to take it in a way, though, that's a little bit different. And it's about this name concept. Let me have one more. What's the big deal about a name then? Eye, Asher, Eye. We've always translated this Hebrew, I am who I am. That's probably, is that what everyone has heard? I am who I am? What does I am who I am mean? This is our Western, by the way, English, Western, Greek, German translation. If you want to have a relationship with the great I am, how do you have a relationship with the great I am? An I am it connotes what? Someone who doesn't change? Someone who's perfect. You know, in our Western mindset, we like to think of God as absolutely perfect. God can't change because God is perfection. How can we improve upon perfection? But could that be limiting God? If we say God can't change, is that a limitation? If we go back into the rabbis and we read Midrash and we do a real translation of this, let me have one more. This is actually what it means. It's not I am who I am, it's I will become who I will become. So God is telling Moses, I'm gingerly stepping into a relationship with you in Israel, and I'm not done growing. I'm not done growing yet. I'm not done changing yet. And as we enter into this relationship, we're going to grow and change together because we're going to grow and change each other. I was having a text back and forth with someone yesterday, and this person said, wow, I've always wondered how in the world am I supposed to have a relationship with the great I am, who is unchanging, perfect, but a God who is becoming, who is changing. Now that's maybe somebody I can be friends with. To me, this changes everything when we actually dig into the Hebrew and look at the rabbinical scholars and the way they translate things. This changes a lot about our God, doesn't it? We have one more, Dave. What is the first thing, negative thing that God says in the Bible? And God saw that it was not good. And there was people being alone. So if we think about a God that can change, and a God that says being alone is the first not good. I mean, we see our God as a triune God, don't we? There's a relationship there. Let me have one more, Dave. God comes to Moses as fire. I played a clip from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe a little while ago. And what did the fawn say to Lucy Pevensey? He's not a tame lion. Fire, there's a little unpredictability in fire, isn't there? There's a little danger. If we look at it in an agricultural context, fire can be cleansing, right? It clears debris. But fire is something that's hard to control, just like a relationship is hard to control. And God appears to Moses as fire. I remember talking about you need a little spark in your relationships. If I've told this story before, just someone raise their hand and I'll keep telling it. But I'll remember not to tell it again. So when Marta and I were first married, we didn't really have much of a honeymoon, you know, and we were living in this kind of little dumpy house on, where was it? In Texas. I can't remember the name. And Fort Hood. So we're living in this dumpy military house where, I mean, you could snap your fingers at one end of the house, you could hear it because the walls are that thin. So anyway, I'm lying in bed in the morning, and Marta's gotten up, and she's downstairs making breakfast, I assume. And I hear all this bang, bang, pan slamming, boom, fridge closing, cabinet slamming. And of course, what do you think? Oh no, what did I do? What have I done? I know I didn't think we went to bed angry last night. Because in my house growing up, we didn't show emotion. You never show emotion. That's too risky, you know. If you didn't clean up your room, you know, you might leave a little note for someone. Clean, you know, could you please clean the dishes, love you. So I sort of creep downstairs, and I look around the corner thinking, I hope I don't get a pan thrown at me. And I go, what's wrong? She's like, oh, hey, good morning. I said, what's wrong? She said, absolutely nothing. I said, well, why are you slamming everything? What are you angry about? Charlie, I'm Hispanic and Italian. This is the way we do things. I'm not angry at all. It took a little spark. Now I see that, there's some unpredictability in that. There's some fun in that. I still worry when the pots and pans start slamming, but, usually it's okay. Usually I'm all right. We have one more. When we don't have change in our relationships, even with God, if God is unmoving, unchanging, we become stagnant. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this in the hospital as a chaplain or in counseling, and it's almost always, to be honest, it's almost always women who tell me this. He just won't change. He will not change. It has been, fill in the blank, X number of years. He will not change. And our relationship, finally, I'm just doing my own thing, or I'm fixing to. Because our relationship has become completely stagnant. He is an I am. Moving water, rushing waters. They're clean, but like relationships, they're dangerous, aren't they? You can't control this. There's a little danger in relationships. There's a little danger in real and right relationships, I would say. These rushing waters are beautiful. It seems to me that here, in this story, Moses says, "Who are you?" You know my name, you just said it twice. Moses, Moses, you have power over me. What's your name? And God gingerly says, well, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Moses goes on to say, all right, look, when the Israelites say, who sent you? I need a little bit better than that. That's when God says, I will become who I will become. God, in a sense, makes God's self somewhat vulnerable. We tend to think of vulnerability as weakness. Whereas if you think about it, making ourselves vulnerable to someone else requires a lot of courage, doesn't it? When we say I love you to someone, we're always not quite sure, are they going to say it back? God begins to give us God's name as a start of a relationship, a real relationship with you and with me. As Christians, we think this is a seismic event. This is God as helpless baby coming into the world with a mom and a dad. And what finally happens here with regard to a name? God says, here's my name. And it's a human name. God has a mom. God has a dad. Not only do we know God's name here on earth, God comes from a town called Nazareth. When you talk about putting yourself out there, it's almost too powerful for us, isn't it? I mean, for a lot of people back then, it was, you're Ben Yosef, the son of Joseph, the carpenter. It's too much, this vulnerability. And then, of course, when we carry this name and this sharing one more step, we find a God who is willing to go so far to convince us of the safety of a relationship that God ends up on a cross to prove that this is a real relationship. This is an I will become relationship. This is the power of relationship. This is what Paul says is the folly of the cross. Victory on the cross, where vulnerability and relationship and love is stronger than any other dark force in the universe. Let me have one more, Dave. I'll kind of, in closing, talk about the Navajo rug. So this is the Navajo rug. Perfection stems from imperfection. in the Semitic mind, as Roar was telling us earlier. Perfection stems from imperfection. We tend to seek perfection, don't we? Particularly in America or in Western culture, we seek perfection. God apparently doesn't seem to think that perfection is important or even really desirable. I think about heaven. You ever think about this? If you go to heaven and it's perfect, if I play golf, I should get 18 holes in one, right? Every shot I hit goes in the hole. If you're cooking and you're baking, every recipe turns out exactly perfectly. There's never a little burnt crust on the end, is there? But is that perfection? Is that heaven? Or is continued growth and change on the other side or in that other dimension heaven? Which would mean that continued growth and change here could be heaven too in our relationship with a changing God. We have my last slide. So in the Navajo rug, there's an intentional mistake, an intentional flaw for the Spirit to move in and out of. It seems that imperfection and change and growth are part of the plan. The death, life, rebirth, unpredictability, tearing up and replanting all seem to be part of the plan. As I close, remember, towards the end, Jesus told the disciples, I don't call you servants. I call you friends. That's the God of change. That's the God of I will become what I will become. That is a name. That is a name not only that changes, that is a name we can latch a hold of, that is a name we can trust. That is a God with a name, I believe, that we can love.